Good evening, everybody. Uneducated Economist. I'd like to thank UFO Engines for requesting that I do a video on negative interest rates. So, negative interest rates. If you're not familiar with negative interest rates, unfortunately, this is not where you get to borrow money for your house at $400,000 and then pay back $380,000. Nope, that's not a negative interest rate. Sorry, guys. It doesn't quite work like that. So if you're not quite familiar with the Federal Reserve and how they're structured, Federal Reserve is the big bank's bank, right? So big banks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan's and those fellas, they have deposits with the Federal Reserve. And generally they get a little tiny bit of interest rates off of that. And when they get that little bit of interest rates, this kind of gives them the position in which they can start lending money out to other people for longer durations for a more expensive interest rate, right? So if you kind of get it, they borrow money short term at low interest rates and lend it out longer term at higher interest rates and take the profit in between. Now, the negative interest rates, where that comes in is when the central banks are trying to stimulate the economy and they have no more room to move, right? They cannot drop they refer to it as zero bound or the lower bound. And this is basically zero on interest rates, where the bank no longer provides any interest on any deposits that they put in there, and in fact they are now saying, you know what, don't even give us money because we are going to keep some of it if you give it to us. Okay, so lend it out there, get it out into the markets, but do not give it to us. That's essentially what they're saying. So if you can kind of imagine, that could really stimulate the economy in the sense that interest rates would drop very low, because the banks could then, you know, it's just like they normally go to the Federal Reserve, who would have the lowest interest rates out there, and they say, well, you don't want it, so they can basically give it to anybody out there who's willing to give it, who's a creditable, you know, borrower. They can give them incredibly low interest rates because they're not getting an interest rate anywhere else. So, you know, down, you know, in competition, basically interest rates would get to very, very low inside of these currencies. Now, long-term effects of these things, we're still under, you know, under this issue of having low interest rates, right? We are now going into a slowdown and these banks no longer have room to move. This is why the Fed is so desperately wanting to raise these interest rates, and so they have room to stimulate the economy again. Most of the time during a recession, central banks will drop their interest rates around 5%. We are at 2.5% interest rates at that Fed fund rate. All right, so I hope that kind of helps as far as negative interest rates. Unfortunately, guys, it doesn't mean that you're going to borrow, you know, money, you know, on your credit card and have to pay back less on the principal. That's not quite how negative interest rates work. All right, Uneducated Economist, thank you very much. And there was another request from UFO Engines, which I really appreciate. You know, if there's any video out there you guys want me to try and cover, you know, go ahead and let me know, and I'll try and cover them for you. Tomorrow, I'm going to try and do one on universal basic income. All right, talk to you guys later.